Hey everyone, it's Just Teach here. First of all, thank you for deciding to check out my video about Class Dojo. I hope that it can be of some use to you. Secondly, let me introduce myself real quick. I am a high school English teacher. Currently, I teach 9th and 10th grades. I have a degree in secondary education from Indiana University, and recently I decided to further my education at the University of Notre Dame. I am a graduate of their Teaching Exceptional Needs cohort, and this summer I will be adding a mild to moderate learning disabilities endorsement to my license. I'm really excited about that part of my teaching career, so that's kind of what led me to using Class Dojo. So during the summer, I realized that I was actually managing my behaviors in a really odd way, and that I wasn't using practices that would reinforce behaviors. Rather, I was using practices that would punish my students. So obviously that made me feel awful. So I decided to make a change. And that's where Class Dojo was able to help me out in that area of my classroom management. So let's go ahead and get started about talking about Classroom Dojo and its potential uses for the high school level. I'm really not going to cover a lot of the uses for the elementary levels, but certainly some of the uses for the high school level are applicable to elementary and vice versa. So just a word of caution before we get started. I know that there are a lot of teachers that don't necessarily believe in rewarding students for work that is expected of them, and that's totally fine, and I certainly would agree with that to a certain extent. However, I do think that it's important that students are given some encouragement in the classroom to engage in behaviors that are appropriate and respectful of the adults in the classroom. So I think it's really important that when you're using Class Dojo that you decide how often you're going to use it and for what behaviors you're going to use it for. And so that's kind of my little word of caution to you, as you can see on the screen. Just to let you know, I tended to only use Class Dojo for class discussion, debates, individual work, group work, things of that nature. So I wasn't using it constantly in my classroom, but its use was consistent, and I think that's the important key aspect of using Class Dojo or any behavior management system. So just some pros that I could think of about using Class Dojo. In terms of ease of use, it's very user-friendly. It can be tailored for any classroom. Like I said earlier, it can be used for the elementary, middle, or high school levels. It can be so friendly, in fact, that when you have students add your class, or maybe you have students that are dropping your class, as so frequently happens in the high school levels, you can add and remove students throughout the year. You can also decide to give your students or parents login information. I didn't actually choose that route, but if you want to do it, that's totally up to you. You are able to receive free reports that will track certain behaviors in your classroom, look at percentage of positive behaviors, percentage of negative behaviors, all of which can be used in the RTI process and in the reevaluation process of an IEP, which is actually what I was using Class Dojo mainly for, other than trying to working with positive reinforcement instead of punishing behaviors for my students. So I actually was using it for the RTI process, and that was very helpful. It's based in theory, so it's not just one of these tools that's thrown out in education that has no educational basis or theory behind it. So it uses Skinner's theory of operant conditioning, in that it can use both positive and negative reinforcers in the classroom. Some cons for Class Dojo: if you're using it for class participation, you're going to have to set up a way in which the percentage of positive behaviors equates to a grade. So that was a little tricky at first, but if you need more information on that, you can private message me through Tumblr, and I can give you a little bit more information on those things. There can be lag times to where you're trying to input the points and they don't necessarily show up right away, or there's a delay between the sound that the system makes and the actual time that it was put in for the points. So you'll kind of see what I'm talking about in a second. It's harder to use if you're tethered to a desktop computer. I would say if you're only having access to a desktop computer, then this isn't probably going to be the system that you want to use. You want to have a mobile device such as a smartphone, an iPhone, or an iPad, or another tablet, to where you can freely move about the classroom. And I think that's the nice thing about Class Dojo, is it's available on those devices, so you can move and record your information as you go around, and that way you can keep your students on task and engaged in the process as you're using Class Dojo. The other thing that I didn't like was that you had to scroll to find the names of your students, but you could certainly set it up so that they are listed in the way that they appear in the rows of your classroom. If you set up by individual desks or by tables, you can do it that way to avoid that problem. But I didn't think about it when I was doing it for the first time around. So on to creating a Class Dojo account. You're going to go to www.classdojo.com. You're going to set up a teacher account, create your classes, and add your students, and it really is just that easy. So let me show you what that actually looks like. So I'm going to exit my full screen. I'm going to come over here. So I've logged in, and this is your login screen. You'll see this here. And then what you will do is you will add a new class. And then you'll select your year. And I'm just going to say we're going to select a 9th grade because I think it's really helpful for freshmen to use this actually. You'll select literature and language arts or whatever class you teach. You'll give your class a name. I normally just do it by period, so we'll put this in as period 3. You then have to enter the names of your students. Now you can enter them as a full name, you can enter a nickname, you can enter all these in manually, or you can copy and paste a list. I just entered them all in manually. Worked just as well. So I'm just going to give you an example. We're going to do a Sarah, and then we're going to choose a Brian, and then a Hillary, and then Joe. So those are my students. Now I can click Choose Avatars, and I can use Class Dojo Monsters. I can use Critters, B.O.B. I can even go down here. There's an option at one point for B.O.B. to upload photos of your students, so you can do it that way. I just use the Class Dojo Monsters, and quite frankly, even high school students love seeing what critter you choose for them. So next step is to go ahead and set up the behaviors. So let me toggle back real quick to the presentation. So I think this really is a valuable part of the presentation. So setting the behavioral expectations for the classes is really the tricky part. You need to tailor this to your classroom set of rules or your school rules. I think that the behaviors need to be different based on your expectations for your different classes. So if you're teaching in honors classes, your behaviors that you are expecting the students to engage in might be a little bit different from a remedial class. I still think you should set high behavioral expectations, but there may be a little bit of leeway there. Also, another important aspect of the behavioral settings for Class Dojo would be that you need to make sure that they are observable to anyone that walks into your room. This is crucial for the RTI process and as well as the IEP process. You need to be able to have measurable behaviors that someone that can come in and see and observe. That way that will help your student potentially qualify for services or reevaluation of services. Also, make sure that you're going over the behaviors with your students because they want to know what you're looking for. And I think this is a great time where Class Dojo has the ability to create a sense of classroom community in which you guys are all deciding on what is going to be acceptable behavior for your classroom and what's not going to be tolerated. And they know that you're going to be tracking that. So I think that can be the really cool part about Classroom Dojo, especially at a high school setting, when you want to give your students a little bit more of the freedom to make some choices for themselves. So let me exit out of this and go back to Class Dojo. So we're going to look at positive behaviors. So obviously you can see these are a little bit hard to observe. So like, how do we know that a student is persistent? How do we know what participating looks like? So you can click to edit any of these. So participating for me looks like participating means raising one's hand and let's say being called on. Whoops. Thoughtful response. Gosh, I cannot spell. Thoughtful response. Okay, so that's what that behavior looks like. And that's a positive behavior. Okay, on task means that you might not be talking to your friends, you're engaging in the work at hand, pencils moving across the paper, however you want to define that. So you can check out all the ones that are positive. You can also add your own. Let's look at needs work. So bullying, like what does bullying look like? Disrespect, no homework, off task, unprepared, talking out of turn. These are the preloaded ones, but obviously you can add in your own needs work behaviors, which are basically the negative behaviors that you're also monitoring for too as well. So I'm just going to use the ones that they give us, and we're going to do save and close. This is the option that it brings up now to download parent invitation codes, which if you want to invite your parents to do or to engage in Class Dojo, you can. I didn't. If ever a parent had a question about it, I could just pull it up on my account and look at it that way and let them know where they were at behavior-wise. It's up to you. I'm going to click not right now, and then I'm going to go here to period 3. And this is the screen that you'll see when you're ready to award some positive behavior points or negative behavior points. So let's say I asked the class a question. Hillary raised her hand. She waited for me to call on her, and then she gave me a thoughtful response. Well, then I'm going to click on Hillary, and I'm going to click on my participating because that's what I set as her positive behavior. And then it said Hillary got 1 point for participating, and it also gave a ding. That ding is so important at the high school level because students are like, did I get a ding? Did I get a buzz? The ding is great. The buzz is not so great. So they understand what those sounds mean, and they listen for them to know that they're on task and they're engaging, rather than me having to constantly tell them whether they are or aren't. So let's see. Hillary got 1 point. Now let's see what happens when Hillary gets a behavior that isn't. So let's say she didn't have no homework. That subtracts it. Now Hillary is at neither a positive or negative score. Let's say Hillary just can't seem to get her stuff together, and she's also off task. Now she's at a negative behavior. So let's go ahead and look at, okay, so we're going to go to the reports now. And you're going to see that what comes up is the whole class behavior. So as you can see, Hillary has made a pretty big impact on the whole class. Now obviously Brian, Joe, and Sarah hadn't engaged in any behaviors that we recorded, so it's basically Hillary is leading the class in 33% positive behavior. But let's see what happens when I go back to my classroom, and I say that, oh, I saw Joe and he was engaging in helping others. So Joe gets 1 point. And then Brian was engaging in talking out of turn, but then Joe went back and he was helping others again. So now I can go to my report section, and now I can see that overall my class is at 50% positive behavior. And then it will break down into how many times I've recorded a student engaging in helping others, how many times we've engaged in participating, talking out of turn, off task, and no homework. So it shows you that breakdown, and then it will also show you what you rewarded and when it was rewarded for, or when it was rewarded. And then I can take a look at the date range. I can do today. I can look at this past week. I can look at this current week. I can look at the month, the last month, and I can look at all time. I can also put in a custom date range too as well. They used to have this feature on Class Dojo called Trend Spotter, but they're working on it right now, as you can see, to where you can look at trends per class. So maybe like what behavior are they really struggling with, but if you look at the donut feature, you can kind of see where your class is struggling. And this was really cool in that I was able to project the entire donut onto the screen in front of the kids, and they were able to see with, as a class, like what are we struggling with. And I know it's kind of one of those things where you don't always like to compare from class to class, but I would sometimes pull up the donut of class period 2, for example, and compare that to class period 3 and say, well, you know, like, look, they're the same group. You know, you guys are sophomores or you guys are freshmen, and they're not struggling with this as much. So like, let's try and see if we can beat them. And then it came to kind of a competition. And I think that was healthy as long as it wasn't too often. So As you can see, there's quite a few features to use with Class Dojo. If you have any questions, feel free to private message me through Tumblr at Just Teach. Thanks!